Hi everyone, I'm Liz from Thread Faction Studio and welcome to the Sew Along for the Late Pants pattern. So let's get started. We've got our pattern pieces cut out, which is we have one set of mirrored pant pieces and one set of pockets. Okay, so we're going to start with the pockets, and the first thing to do is finish the raw edge on three sides of the pocket, both sides and the bottom of each of the two separate pocket pieces. Okay, so now that's taken care of, we're going to prepare the tops of the pockets by folding over and pressing 1 centimetre and then folding over again and pressing by 2.5 centimetres, and do that on the top edge of both of the pockets. Okay, so now that we've prepped this top edge by pressing it over by 1 centimetre and then by a further 2.5 centimetres, the next step is to take that last fold and on each side here fold it back in the opposite direction. I'm just going to pop a pin in there like this to the right side of the fabric, and then do the same on the other end. Just exactly on that 2.5 centimetre pressed line. You can see that I have that pinned on both edges there. And then we're going to sew with the 1 centimetre seam allowance from the upper folded edge to the bottom of that 2.5 centimetre section there, on both ends of both the pockets. Okay, so now that we've stitched that, just that small section on each side, so we're going to turn that in the right way, and you may need a point turner to get a nice sharp corner there, but turn both sides in the right way like that. And that should be folded now across the original crease that you pressed into the top. Now what we're going to do is press the seam allowance under for the remainder of both of the sides, like that. And then press the bottom edge under as well, so that's 1 centimetre around all the sides. And once that's all pressed and lined up, I'm going to edge stitch right along the bottom of the top pocket hem here, right along this edge on both pockets. Alright, so there are our pockets prepped and ready to go. There's a line of top stitching holding that top hem of the pocket down, and the rest of these seam allowances all the way around are pressed under by 1 centimetre. So now we're on to joining the pockets to the fronts of the pant pieces. So when you cut your pant pieces, you would have marked the pocket placement markings. So I have marked these with just a little bit of red thread, but obviously you can mark them with an erasable or washable fabric marker of some kind. So you may not be able to see my red thread markings on the right side here, but I can see my little tacks there and there, and I'm going to use those to line up the very top, the top two corners of the hemmed edge of the pocket. So this is the front side of my pants. I'll just line the two top corners of the pocket up with those markings and making sure the rest of the pocket is laying flat. Alright, I'm going to pin the pocket in place. Now I can see the print on this pattern is making the actual pocket difficult to see. But it's just here. And I'm going to top stitch the pocket to the pants just about 3 mil from the edge of the pocket all the way around those 3 sides, remembering to back tack at the start and the finish to reinforce the top of the pocket. And then repeat for the other leg. All right, now we have our pocket pieces, our pockets attached to each of our main pants pattern pieces. So there we go. Now the next step in the pattern is to sew the inseam here, but by way of preparation for things that come later, I'm going to do a little bit of pre-pressing to make hemming and preparing the waistband easier in a later step. So I'm going to head over to the ironing board and I'm going to press the bottom hem over first by 1 centimetre and then by 6.25 centimetres. There's a lovely wide hem on these trousers. So I'm just going to press it over and then press it over again, making a crease there that I can rely on later to make the hem easier to fold up when it comes to the hemming step. And likewise, on the top edge of each of the pattern pieces where the waistband is going to be, I'm going to first press over 1 centimetre again, and then I'm going to press over 4.5 centimetres to accommodate the elastic. So if you have a slightly different size elastic, if you couldn't get the size stipulated in the pattern and you've made adjustments, that's the fold that you're going to want to make sure that your elastic fits in. Because this top edge is not completely straight, it goes up at the back to accommodate the seat of your pants. You just, when folding over this edge and folding over the larger edge, you just need to use a bit of steam to ease that fabric and make sure that you've got the right crease all the way along. So, heading to the ironing board to do some pre-pressing, double fold hem, and the 2 folds at the top of each pattern piece to accommodate the waistband. Okay, with that bit of pre-pressing done on the top and the bottom hem, we can move on to the next step in the pattern, which is to sew the inseam here of each leg. So, you want to fold your pattern piece together with the right sides facing. Undo that pre-pressed hem there because we don't want to be sewing the inseam with that folded up. Okay. Now there is a notch at the knee here in both the front and the back of the pattern. We just need to line those up first. From there to the bottom hem should line up evenly, with the seam line being the same length. So line those up. Okay, now this section, the top section of the inseam, the back crutch here is slightly shorter than the front crutch, and that's to accommodate for how much more on the bias that seam is and how it will stretch and bag out over time. At this stage though, you have to ease these two together over that distance. So line up the crutch and then just give it a little tug so that it's laying flat. and then sew along the inseam there with the 1 centimetre seam allowance, and then finish the raw edges together. That one, just with an overlock or a zigzag, and then repeat for the other leg. Okay, so now we have our inseams sewn and the raw edges finished. Now the next official step in the pattern is to sew the crutch curve, but I'm going to take the opportunity while it's still 2 separate legs and it's less awkward to manoeuvre through the machine, to sew the hems up. So now that our inseam's sewn, we can sew up these hems. I'm just going to fold the hem up along those pre-pressed folds that we put in before we did the inseams, and you can see it folds up easily along those lines. Pop some pins in there to secure it and to stop it travelling as I sew around. And then I'll edge stitch just along this top folded edge here all the way around both hems, and then that step will be done. Alrighty, so now we have our 2 legs with the inseams sewn, the hems done, and the pockets attached. And the next step is to sew the crutch seam. So to do that, we're going to turn one leg in the right way, like that, and put the leg that's in the right way inside the inside out leg, and line up the crutch seam. So then line up the seam at the crutch, at the centre of the crutch. So line up the inseams of the 2. You are to tell that everything's in order because you've got the 2 right sides of the fabric facing each other. And just pin from the top of the front all the way around the crutch curve to the top of the back. Now these 2 cut edges should be exactly the same length, so if you're having to do a lot of easing to get them to match up, then you may have something inside out or back to front in some way. So if these ones are hard to match up, check that you've got the back crutch curve matching the back crutch curve and the inseams lined up, and one of your pant legs inside out and one in the right way, and the one that's in the right way inside the inside out one, so that you've got the right sides of the fabric facing each other. Okay. So there you go. If you can see that, we've got our pins all the way around the crutch curve. Now we're going to sew that with the 1 centimetre seam allowance and then finish the raw edges. Okay, so now we have our crutch seam sewn and it's time for the big reveal. go. So we have our main pants together with the pockets at the front, hemmed at the bottom, and we just need to sew our elastic casing up here and insert our elastic. So I'm just going to turn them in the wrong way for that so that you can see what I'm doing. Right. So earlier we did some pre-pressing along this top edge. So in just the same way as I did with the hems, I'm going to fold along my pre-pressed lines to create the casing, elastic casing at the top of the pants. So making sure everything's laying nice and flat and pinning it in place. I'm just going all the way around the top edge. Pinning that casing in place. Right, so this is the centre back seam here, and to one side of the centre back seam I'm going to leave an opening so that I can insert my elastic. So I'm just going to leave an opening about that long there. And I'm going to mark each end of that opening with 2 pins so I don't accidentally sew it closed and have to unpick. Alright, so it's all pinned up now, and starting at one end of this space that I'm leaving open at the back centre, I'm going to stitch just a couple of mils from this folded edge to make sure you don't stitch too far from the edge, because you won't be left with enough space in here to insert your elastic. So just a couple of mils from this folded edge and stitch that down all the way around to the other end of the opening. All right, on to the last steps. So we've folded and we've sewn over our casing on the top edge, and we just have that opening in the back to insert our elastic. Here's our piece of elastic. I've measured this to suit my model's preferences for her waist. And then I'm going to take a bodkin. You can use a safety pin for this step if you don't have a bodkin. But then just feed the elastic through the waistband casing. Make sure you don't lose the tail end. Okay. Now making sure that your elastic is not twisted in your casing anywhere. Overlap the 2 ends of the elastic by 2 centimetres, and then zigzag or sew down the width of the elastic there to securely hold the two together. Okay, so we've secured the two ends of our elastic together. We can feed that back into the casing and distribute the gathers evenly. Okay. So the last step is to close off this, to sew up this section of the elastic casing. So if you ease the gathers to one way or the other, so that that section of the casing can lie flat, that makes it much easier. And then fold the casing over, making sure you're folding it along that crease that you had originally. Put a few pins in, hold your elastic out of the way, and then just edge stitch your opening closed right along that edge, making sure you don't catch the elastic in the seam. And there you have it. With your elastic casing sewn closed, your lake pants are finished.